All right, it's time for an upgrade to our mental software. Today, we're going to build a critical analyst's toolkit, something we all need for this new age of AI images that are just, well, they're everywhere.
For a little while there, spotting an AI image felt like a fun party trick, right? You just look for the super obvious stuff, the mangled six-fingered hands or those backgrounds that looked kind of melty. But yeah, those days are pretty much over. The easy tells are disappearing fast. AI is getting so much smarter, so much more subtle, and that means our skills have to keep up.
So, here's our game plan. First, we're going to move beyond the obvious glitches. Then, we'll get into how to read a scene's internal logic. After that, we'll dive into this fascinating idea called the uncanny valley, play a little digital detective, and finally, we'll wrap up by looking at the evolving challenge ahead.
Okay, first up, beyond obvious glitches. Look, before we can get to the really advanced stuff, we have to make sure we've got the basics down cold. These are the foundational tells, and even though they're getting rarer, they should still be the very first thing you check for.
Yeah, this is what you could call the novice checklist. We're talking about all the greatest hits, right? Extra fingers or super weird toes, mismatched eyes with strange pupils, inconsistent ears and teeth, that weird, unnatural blur in the background, reflections in glass or water that make absolutely no sense, and of course, that overly smooth, almost plastic skin texture. These are the classic AI artifacts. You absolutely need to know them, but honestly, they're just not enough anymore. Okay, this is where we get to the next level of analysis, and it's where things get really interesting. We're going to shift our focus from looking for a tiny flaw on an object, like a wonky hand, to finding flaws in how all the objects in the entire scene relate to each other. It's kind of like going from being a proofreader looking for typos to being an editor, checking if the whole story actually makes sense. So what's the big difference here? Well, think about it. A visual glitch, like an extra finger, is basically just a drawing mistake. It's actually pretty easy for an AI to learn how to fix that over time. But a logical flaw, that's a whole different ballgame. That shows the AI doesn't actually understand how the world works. It can draw a perfect-looking sun, but it doesn't get how shadows are supposed to behave in reality. And that is a much, much harder problem for AI to solve. And here are the big four inconsistencies you should be hunting for. First up, lighting. Do the shadows actually match the light source, or are they all pointed in crazy directions? Second is perspective. Do things just look off, like a car in the background that's somehow way bigger than a house in the foreground? Third, check out any text or symbols. AI is notoriously bad at this. You'll see gibberish on signs or t-shirts. And finally, look at patterns. Check out brick walls, tiles, fabrics. AI often gets lazy and just copy-paste as a texture, which creates this weirdly perfect, unnatural repetition. These are the clues that you're looking at something that can imitate our world, but doesn't truly get it. All right, let's switch gears a bit and add a more psychological tool to our kit. This one isn't about logic or physics. It's about that gut feeling, that little creepy sensation you get when you see something that looks almost human, but just isn't quite right. That feeling actually has a name, the uncanny valley. It's this idea that when a replica gets really, really close to looking human, but isn't perfect, it gives us this feeling of unease, sometimes even revulsion. It's not about an obvious mistake. It's more like our brains have this built-in human detector, and when something is 99% of the way there, that last 1% sets off all the alarms, even if we can't immediately put our finger on why. So what are these little cues that trigger that feeling? Well, think about skin that's way too perfect, with no pores, no tiny imperfections. Or eyes that are shaped perfectly, but just look dead, vacant. Then there are stiff, rigid, or unnatural facial expressions. And a big one is perfect symmetry. No real human face is perfectly symmetrical, so when you see one that is, it just feels wrong. These are the subtle things that can push a portrait from realistic into unsettling. Okay, so we've sharpened our eyes, we've learned to trust our gut. Now it's time to play digital detective. Let's talk about some basic forensic tools you can use, because sometimes the biggest clues aren't in the picture at all. They're in its history. Honestly, your most powerful tool here is probably one you already know: reverse image search. It's incredibly simple. You just take the suspicious image, pop it into a search engine like Google Images or TinEye, and basically ask the internet, hey, where did this come from? The results are like digital archaeology. If the image shows up on a credible news site from 5 years ago, that's a good sign. But if it only just appeared yesterday on a bunch of brand new anonymous accounts, that's a massive red flag. If you want to dig a little deeper, there's also image metadata. This is basically data that's hidden inside the image file itself, stuff like what camera was used or the date the photo was taken. Now, a big word of caution here. This data can be easily faked or stripped out. So while it can sometimes offer another hint, you can't rely on it as absolute proof.
So as we start to wrap this up, it's really important to remember something. All of these techniques we've talked about, they're for right now. This isn't a skill you learn once and you're done. It is an ongoing cat and mouse game between this technology and our ability to analyze it.
Because as these AI models get better, they're going to master lighting, they'll figure out perspective, they'll even climb out of that uncanny valley. And when they do, a lot of these specific tells we talked about will become obsolete. But the one tool that will always be important is your own critical thinking. That never goes out of style. It's the constant practice of questioning what you see, considering the source, and just asking why. And that leaves us with a fascinating and maybe a little unsettling final thought to chew on. As these tools get closer and closer to perfection, as they create images that are visually and logically indistinguishable from reality, what will our definition of authentic even become? What does it mean for an image to be real in a world where a flawless fake can be generated in seconds? It's definitely something to think about.